Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! Yes! The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves are world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I am Grant McAuley. These are the Kia Studios, and this is the end of the weekend, the end of another series for the Atlanta Braves. And unfortunately, it is yet another bitter pill for this team, of which they've had quite a few of those bitter pills on the road. This one, though, slipping away from them in the middle innings against the Tampa Bay Rays and an eventual 8-3 loss on Sunday, dropping 2 out of 3, and coming the day after it seemed like maybe, just possibly, perhaps, the Braves had gotten a little bit of a spark on the road to maybe get them over the hump as far as that is concerned. But I've said maybe, perhaps, possibly an awful lot over the first couple of weeks, but it just hasn't been materializing for this club the way that they expected it to, and obviously the way that Braves fans have expected it to. I can tell you, as the lightning rod that is social media has told me, the frustrations are many for Atlanta Braves fans, and justifiably so in many ways when you consider the expectations of the team and thereby the fan base. This has been not the start anybody was looking for, and it began in the worst of possible ways when the Braves went 0 for a 7-game road trip to open the season. Now, we're not going to relitigate those two series because they are done and they are dusted. The Braves got home and became, at least I'm going to say this, the best way that I know how to, a 500 club since that road trip. Now, that may not sound like much, but when I did the show with the Braves sitting on a big fat 0-7 record, I think anybody would have been dying for a week or two, a week and a half, in which you went 500, and includes a 2 out of 3 series win over the Philadelphia Phillies and a split against the Miami Marlins thanks to a rainout on the last Sunday. So a few things have happened since the last show. A few things have happened this season, and many things that we have to get into that still could happen both in the near term and the longer term for the Braves in 2025 that we are going to unpack on this edition of From the Diamond. Before we do any of that, I want to remind you, as always, make sure you are following along with me on social media. You can find me on most platforms at Grant McAuley. If you haven't already, you can go ahead and do that. You can also find the show on X at From the Diamond with an underscore on the end, on Instagram at From the Diamond with no underscore on the end. And most importantly, you can subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcasts and find it on the Odyssey app. All you have to do is search for, you guessed it, From the Diamond. And now, with all of that shilling out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on for the Braves here over the past week, because that's kind of what we do here on the show. Yes, we'll take that bigger picture look, as big a picture as you can, of 2 weeks. It is still very much a small sample size, but what we've had, what we've seen, what we've experienced as onlookers, and certainly as the Braves themselves, has left a lot to be desired. And how exactly, why exactly, they're still trying to figure some of those things out. But we can all, I think, if you've watched a Braves game, a series, or if you've watched every inning this season, and God bless you if you have, because I certainly understand what it's like. You just look at certain things and you think that is going to be the moment, or those are the missed opportunities that are going to prove costly for this club. And many, if not most, of those opportunities have been happening at the plate, where the Braves with runners in scoring position have been, to say the least, challenged this season, finding the clutch hits that they need to. And, they've been challenged in a lot of other ways, too. We can point at the rotation and losing Ronaldo Lopez. That's obviously nothing that they needed either. The bullpen has been in a state of flux, and we saw it give up a game on Sunday, though I will go back and point to the offense and say, okay, guys, you're going to have to get more than 3 runs if you want to win this baseball game when you're already down by a, 4-3 score before things went really sideways in the middle frames. And that, I think, as much as anything, if you're trying to find that sense of normalcy, that sense of comfort that, hey, you know what, this team has got it figured out, that's all going to happen at the plate for me. We can talk about the bullpen, the usage, the non-usage. We can talk about sending certain pitchers to the minors, bringing others up, not sending other pitchers to the minors, not signing another pitcher in the offseason. We can talk about that too. But I can tell you, none of that is going to matter if the Braves cannot find a way to consistently score runs because that has been the thing more than most that has hurt them throughout the course of this season. And that is the thing that they're going to have to solve. And it's not going to be by going out and making a litany of trades over the course of the season. You are who you are. You've got who you've got. And who they've got is an extremely talented core with, and I don't want to be like the previews before the movie, but hey, Ronald Acuña Jr. is coming soon. I don't know what his release date's going to be, when he's going to be out in full, but I can tell you it's going to be a blockbuster weekend and what they hope will be a blockbuster run over the course of the season. I'm going to lay that analogy down, but he is a guy that you expect to energize this club, and I believe that he will. But you've got to have other guys, as I said last week, all pulling on that rope, all pulling in the same direction, and everybody is going to, have to roll up their sleeves and get a good grip on that thing and put their back into it, because the Braves have dug themselves a hole early in the season, the likes of which, for recent Braves clubs, we just haven't seen that much of. Now, the standings, when you look in the National League East, the Philadelphia Phillies just dropped into second place with their loss already on Sunday, as the Mets have a half a game lead there. Miami Marlins 8-7 after their, I would say, a plucky. I'm sure that everybody loves being called plucky, but that's what they've been this year, and they are over 500. They're 8-7. The Nationals at 6-9, and then you find the Atlanta Braves on a 4-11 record, fueled, for the most part, that bad opening series, in which I think even if you came home 2-5, you would have said, okay, that was not a fun road trip, but at least we grabbed a couple of wins. We got ourselves right. But by the time you got home, it just started to compound. But I felt like they were starting to move past that, and I think that they are. But you've still got to figure some things out offensively, because that has been the trouble for this team. And we've seen some moments. The Marcell Ozuna walk-off home run against the Philadelphia Phillies in extra innings after a nearly 3-hour rain delay to win that series, take 2 out of 3, which, by the way, I don't know if you noticed or not, but the Braves were this close, and it doesn't count, but they were this close to sweeping away the Phillies in that 3-game series. That would have gone a long way towards making the Braves and their fans feel a lot more comfortable about what the early part of the season is, but almost, of course, does not count. And so the Braves are just going to have to get to the business of winning games. I talked to a lot of these guys during the homestand about where is, I guess, the collective head space right now. And pretty much to a man, you would hear guys talk about it, whether it's me asking the question or somebody else. I was in those media scrums, as we call them. And the theory is, not the theory, but the way that they're going to do it is by taking it day by day. By giving you the greatest, perhaps, of all baseball cliches, one day at a time, guys. Because over 162 games, you will drive yourself absolutely nuts by trying to live in the moment of every single one and allow that one to bleed over into the next day and the next day and the next day. So you have to have the ability to kind of draw that line and move past it. But for this Braves club in the early going, when you start out with the kind of frustrating, lack of production at the plate and a winless road trip, it's going to be difficult to put that aside. Now, the Braves got right big time in their home opener. They had that energy, that juice flowing, and they get shut out the next day. And then they get rained out. And then they take 2 out of 3 from the Phillies. And then they get beat by the Rays. And then they stage a dramatic comeback on a Saturday. You see where I'm going with this? It's been a roller coaster for the Braves thus far. Now, they were going way down for a while before that thing finally started ticking back up. But I can tell you, that roller coaster, they want to have a few more highs built in there. And they're going to have to work on that collectively. That comeback in Tampa, I thought yesterday, might be that thing that kind of sparks them on this road trip. And they've still got one more stop here. And we're going to talk about what the Toronto series is and could be for this Braves team, because they may be getting Spencer Strider back. That is the expectation, I believe, to put him back in rotation. That's not going to change anything for the lineup. But when you talk about finding ways to boost the overall morale of the spirits of the club, which is also a conversation that, maybe eyewash to a lot of people, but I do think it matters. Getting a guy like Spencer Strider back in there can give you that jolt of confidence, especially if he comes in and pitches anything close to the way he was pitching for AAA Gwinnett. He's not going to be facing AAA lineups, so let's just go ahead and stipulate that. But the dominance that he showed there, and we'll talk about this later on in the show, that had you feeling pretty good about the Spencer Strider that you are getting. Somebody who got over 90 pitches this last time, or 290 pitches, struck out 13 batters in 5 1/3 innings of 1-run ball. As they say, that'll play. The Braves could certainly use that. Now, some of the other maneuvering that they've done with his pitching staff, especially the demotion of A.J. Smith-Shawver, I think some people are like, well, I don't understand that. Especially if Bryce Elder is still on the big league club. What are we doing there? Because didn't Shawver look pretty good on Saturday? And yes, he did. Especially once I feel like he kind of started pitching with an edge a little bit when he started nibbling a bit too much and just finally just keyed in. And I wasn't sure he was going to get through 5 innings, let alone 5 innings of 2-run ball, but he did. But I think that the Braves are trying to anticipate the innings they're going to have to cover over the course of this next week. And we'll see how that all plays out. With a couple of off days mixed in, maybe the fifth starter is not going to be as big of a deal. But regardless, getting Strider back in to get to that whole point, and we'll get into this a lot more throughout the course of the show, that could make a huge difference for this Braves club. But another series loss on Sunday as the Tampa Bay Rays finished things off in I would say, two very decisive ways. They had the Braves no hit into the middle innings. And then, of course, they dropped 8 runs on them overall. And the Braves offense wasn't able to dig out of that hole, obviously. But after this dreadful start to the season, final couple of weeks in April, what does that look like? It starts out with 3 games in Toronto. Then the Braves come home for a 3-game set against the Minnesota Twins, then the St. Louis Cardinals. And then one more road trip. It's Arizona, pretty good club, and the Colorado Rockies. And if anything could get the Braves offense going, maybe a trip to Colorado would be that kind of thing. It's been known to be a hitter's haven, and hopefully the Braves figure it out before then because they're going to need to from a consistency standpoint. But I think the question becomes now, where will the Braves be at the end of the month? Because as much as we can point to that 0-7 start and say that wasn't ideal and that's going to be a problem, and it is a problem right now, I think the question is what can they do with the rest of this month to put themselves in position to, pivot their season, turn their season around, and do so, I think, in large part by getting Ronald Acuña Jr. back and finding consistency in that offense. But the latter of those two, obviously, easier said than done. And we'll update Ronald Acuña Jr.'s status on this show as he should be flying out to Los Angeles, hopefully getting good news that could have him with finally a firm timetable to rejoin this club and a rehab assignment, all the things that need to happen there. We'll provide some updates on that. And we'll see what the Braves are able to do in the time in between now and getting Ronald Acuña Jr. back because those games are going to be pretty darn important. But just to point this out, just last year, the Houston Astros, a club that had won the American League West, I believe, 6 if not 7 consecutive years, they started out the year 12-24. And people, probably myself included, were ready to finally shovel some dirt on the Houston Astros. And all they did was end up winning the American League West. So stranger things have happened. This division, I think, is going to be tougher than the American League West was last year, barring a monumental collapse by the Philadelphia Phillies. And we'll see who the Mets are. And we're going to find that all out over the course of the next 148 or 49 games, whatever it is now, 47 games, whatever that math is. We're going to find out over the next 5 or 6 months. So that's where we're going to buckle in and take the ride. But coming up on this show, we'll dive into this week in Braves baseball. I'm going to share some conversations as well that I had with a few Braves about Spencer Schwellenbach and what he has done this season, how special that is. That'll be coming your way here soon. And just what makes him so good, I asked some of his teammates, and we'll see what they had to say. I'll also be joined by Rays radio broadcaster Neil Solondz for a trip around the big leagues, a little bit of an update on baseball down in Tampa because, as we know, it looked a little bit different in a minor league baseball park this time around. But up next, we'll get into This Week in Braves baseball as we continue on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're live from the Kia Studios on Sunday as we wrap up the weekend and wrap up another disappointing series, unfortunately, for the Atlanta Braves. I think really we're hoping to build on the momentum of their Philadelphia win, the 2 out of 3 that they took from the Phillies, the first-place club at the time, though at the moment, as we speak here on Sunday evening, have been knocked out of first place. New York Mets, I believe, came in tied with them today. Mets must not be done playing, but so as those who listen to this podcast later don't get very confused by these standings, we are still live on a Sunday as the show goes. But be that as it may, the Atlanta Braves are not closing in on first place just yet, though their series win against the Phillies, to get back to my bigger point, was something you thought might build a little bit of momentum, as was Saturday's win over the Tampa Bay Rays, the way that it happened, where the offense was just kind of listless. You were missing opportunities again, then all of a sudden it was the slugfest Braves that made it happen, figured it out. And maybe, again, there's a word of the season, maybe they could get that right. Win another series. You keep winning series, you can dig out of even an 0-7 start, which the Braves very much would like to do. But this Braves offense, I think, to the point, and this is where the rubber meets the road with the Braves' struggles, is they got to get their bearings. They got to get rolling. They got to find continuity, and they've got to do it with runners on base. I crunched these numbers this morning, so heading into Sunday. And I think this is a concern for people because in 2024, this was the Achilles heel of the Atlanta Braves. Well, that and injuries. And you can point at injuries and you can say that's a big reason why the Braves weren't the team that they were supposed to be a year ago, and that statement is absolutely true. But you can also point at underperformance as a reason the Atlanta Braves were not the team they wanted to be, and that statement also is absolutely true. So these things are not mutually exclusive. There was a little bit of everything going on and going wrong for the Braves offense a year ago, but everything about that led into the winter of thinking, all right, Let's get some people healthy again. Let's put that season out of our mind. Let's move on. The Braves changed hitting coaches, though I will say, and I know there's going to be a lot of talk about that, nobody can go up there to the plate with you. You're going to have to figure that thing out on your own, and everybody knows that to a man, the individual responsibility that is of going up there and getting the job done. You can work on all of the things beforehand, but in the game, it's a different animal, and I think that's still very much in process right now. So I would preach patience as far as hitting coaches are concerned because I just don't think they're as big a factor as maybe we talk about sometimes. There are great ones, there are bad ones, there are ones that are in between, and there are others that their greatness is in kind of letting guys do the things that make them successful and just making those little tweaks, those little suggestions, those little changes. It's not all about completely starting from scratch and trying to rebuild a player, a swing, mechanics, all of that stuff. Just doesn't necessarily work that way, I guess is what I'm saying. But putting that aside, and again, I crunched these numbers on Sunday morning prior to the game in which the Braves lost by an 8-3 score on Sunday afternoon. But Atlanta came in batting 172 with runners in scoring position. That's 28th of the 30 teams in Major League Baseball. And if you're wondering if that's bad, yes, it's very bad. It's not good at all. For some context, though, and this is what I found to be really weird, the Mets, who at least momentarily on Sunday took over first place from the Phillies, at least by half a game, until pending the outcome of their game. Mets 29th in Major League Baseball, hitting with runners in scoring position. These dudes are batting 154, so they're even worse. And the Phillies, they're not much to write home about either. The Phillies are 25th in Major League Baseball with runners in scoring position. They're batting 215, but those clubs came into Sunday 9-5. So other aspects of the club are obviously helping out. Let's just point that out. And you can score a lot of runs that have nothing to do with the runners at second and third. You can score runs on home runs with a runner on first base, solo home runs, wild pitches, errors, whatever it is. There's a lot of ways to score runs. But runners in scoring position and hitting with runners in scoring position is something the Braves very much need to improve on from their 172 average coming into Sunday. But how about that Phillies series where the Braves took 2 out of 3 from Philadelphia and the one loss in the middle game was a 4-3 defeat on a solo home run by Trey Turner that came in the 9th inning. But Philadelphia went 4 for 27 with runners in scoring position in that 3-game series, and they lost 2 out of 3 in Atlanta. They left 29 guys on base. So different clubs at different times are all going to be struggling with runners in scoring position. It doesn't make it any more or any less frustrating for the Atlanta Braves. And watching and wondering, when are those big hits going to start kind of piling up? When is the game going to correct itself? When are the baseball gods going to smile on the Atlanta Braves? I don't think they were smiling at Matt Olson today, who hit a just absolute rocket that went right off the top of the left field wall. Was about, an inch or two from going over the wall for a 3-run home run. Would have tied the game up, at least momentarily. Instead, hits the top of the wall, bounces back in. It's just been that kind of year for the Braves. One at bat, you got somebody like Ozzie Albies on Saturday, too aggressive on a 3-0 count, short circuits a rally. Next time up, hits a home run and helps the Braves to come back to a victory. It's just the way it works. Austin Riley against the Philadelphia Phillies in the game that they lost, the middle contest last Thursday. Came up with the bases loaded a couple of times. Wasn't able to get the job done, but he did hit a home run that tied that game. So it's just one of those things. Make that Wednesday. That was Wednesday's game. The rain delay made it feel like 2 to 3 extra days in that series, but it was not. But either way, it's just a struggle right now for the Braves with runners in scoring position. But we have seen some signs of life, and I don't think any are more encouraging than the early results for Sean Murphy, who homered twice on Saturday and has looked extremely comfortable at the plate in returning. And the Braves need the offense from wherever they can get it. Murphy hit a 3-run home run in his first at-bat back, and that was a big one. Obviously, all these home runs are pretty big for the Braves here lately because you need all the runs any which way or shape that they come. But Sean has taken over the majority of the starts, which I thought might be a little more slow played, I guess, since they decided to keep Drake Baldwin at the big league level. I'll get into that in a minute. But I kind of thought, hey, Sean didn't get to catch a ton on that rehab assignment. Maybe they'll kind of ease him back in, catch him in 2 out of 3. No, you pretty much saw him on an everyday basis with Drake Baldwin just mixing in there. And we'll see what that looks like going forward and in Toronto as well. There are some off days, which will help out. But it's pretty hard to take a hitter that's swinging it as well, I think, as Sean Murphy is, and seeing it as well. That's another point. Sean Murphy came back, looked a little bit different. He's got those rec specs on. Able to see, able to focus, maybe a little bit easier than dealing with contacts. Whatever he's seeing right now is looking pretty good to Sean Murphy. So a couple of more home runs on Saturday, upped him to 3 on the year. 3 of his first 4 games in an Atlanta uniform this year, he homered. And he's just been hitting rockets all over the place. So it's good to see Sean Murphy's swing kind of back to what we expect it to be and what he expects it to be. Because 2024 was a lost year for him, perhaps as much or more than just about any other Brave this side of Ronald Acuña Jr., who clearly we want to see back sometime soon. Now, Austin Riley's been the subject of a lot of early season frustrations, his own included, and he said as much a little over a week ago. But he had 5 consecutive multi-hit games coming into Sunday. So he went from batting a .143 last Saturday to .276 coming into Sunday. And I know he had some trouble with runners in scoring position. That's trouble for the whole team. Obviously, we've talked a lot about that. Probably need to put it down for a while, move on to something else, because it's just a fact of life at this moment. But seeing some things from Austin Riley that make you feel like, okay, maybe he is not as lost as it may have felt over that first week and a half. But let's discuss Ronald Acuña Jr., because I think that's going to be a major talking point, if it's not already. Have a little bit more gasoline thrown on that fire. Ronald is supposed to fly out to Los Angeles at the start of the week, and he'll see the doctors that performed the reconstructive knee surgery, and they're going to sign off, it's expected, on him having no limitations whatsoever moving forward, which means that change of directions running, quick start-stop stuff, and a lot more outfield work. All the things that he needs to do to get ready to play outfield on a daily basis, because that's what the Braves are bringing him back as, not as a DH, but bringing him back to be the club's starting right fielder. So if he can do that and get cleared for a rehab assignment, I figure that's going to be at least a couple of weeks, if not 3. That would put him in the early portion of the month of May. Now, I've been asked a lot about it, and I still haven't changed my opinion, but, hey, the Braves have done some stuff that clearly it's on their time, it's not on mine. Would they bring Ronald Acuña back a little bit earlier if they felt like, hey, he's looking great and we're just kind of wasting time down here in the minor leagues doing a rehab assignment? I think they could, but I don't think it's going to be just because they got off to a slow start this year that they cut short his rehab and just throw him back in there. I still think you need to manage as much as you can for the health of the player and just make sure that he's checked all the boxes and is ready to come back. And I'm sure that that's top of mind. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I do think it's important. Michael Harris II, a big go-ahead home run for the Braves on Saturday. They need to get some good production from him. With no Profar and with Ronald Acuña Jr. not back right now, I think there's maybe a little bit more pressure, a little bit more expectation at the very least on Harris, especially when he's hitting at the top of the order. We've seen him run a little bit. He's doing his thing defensively in the outfield. That's all great. But need to see something offensively speaking. And he's not the only one. But at the top of the order, that would go a long way towards giving Atlanta some opportunity to start some rallies and to push those rallies into that next level. But that, of course, will involve hitting with runners in scoring position, which we've covered a time or 3. Now, Marcell Ozuna continues to drive the team offensively. He had the big home run on Thursday, into Friday. Beat the Phillies. They took the series on that marathon night. I felt like that was a huge boost for this club. And taking 2 out of 3 from the Phillies right there was a must. Let's just face that. But 2 weeks into the season, he's leading Major League Baseball with 16 walks through his first 14 games and came into Sunday with a 500 on-base percentage. Not slugging percentage, a 500 on-base percentage. So some unreal production from Ozuna. And if you're watching the game on Sunday, as I was, middle to late innings there. I don't remember if it was the 5th or 6th inning, but the Ozuna at bat in which he eventually made it all the way over to third, eventually came around to score. A lot of wincing and limping up the line for Ozuna. And I don't know about you, that certainly makes me a little bit nervous. Because if there's a hitter that the Braves cannot afford to lose at any cost, Marcell Ozuna is that guy. He is the one guy that through 2024, save maybe a week or two, was as consistent as it gets. And I just laid it out for you. He's hitting homers, he's driving in runs, he's drawing walks, he's doing everything he can and then some. He's put up about 2 players worth of production just by himself this year. So if you lose him for any period of time, that would be a severe, severe blow to the Braves offense, which is still searching for the answers at the moment. But if they could get Matt Olson going, along with Austin Riley, along with Ozuna, I think the heart of the order is a threat to opposing pitchers, which is what we expected it to be. Now, Olson's StatCast, and I talked about that home run that he hit off the top of the wall, and we've talked about expected stats a little bit, and I have a lot of people say, okay, well, expected stats are great, but the real ones are the ones that are bothering me. But the expected stats, or the rates that you'll find there on that StatCast page for Olson, would lead you to believe that he's going to get things figured out and there's going to be some better results coming. High levels for hard hit rate and average exit velocity. He's up in, I believe, the 90th or better percentile on both of those. But his launch angle sweet spot, I don't know if we have enough time here before we go to break for me to explain that, but hitting the ball exactly where you want to exactly at the right angle, at the right speed to do some maximum damage, he's in the 7th percentile there, which means, to me, his launch angle, and if you've watched him, a lot of ground balls, his launch angle is not right. If he's able to adjust that and you match it with a hard hit rate, I think you'll start seeing the Matt Olson we saw in the second half, the Matt Olson we saw for much of 2023, the Matt Olson that the Braves very much need him to be this season to get their offense on track. But that's just one of the things that kind of jumped off the page to me was a lot of good, a lot of red on that StatCast sheet, but one really, really troubling blue line as far as that launch angle is concerned. If you make that adjustment, I think we could see a lot more out of Matt Olson. But that's what's going on with the Braves offense, which is not enough, as the case may be, but we're going to turn the page and talk about a little bit of something that is, I think, very encouraging for Braves fans, and that would be Spencer Schwellenbach. When we come back, I will talk a little bit about what was going on with Spencer Schwellenbach with his first 3 starts and what jumped out to some of his Braves teammates who I talked to about what makes this righty as successful as he is, because it's been impressive to watch, and even his Braves teammates are in awe. We'll talk a little bit more about Spencer Schwellenbach as This Week in Braves Baseball continues on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Nally. So, before we get to Spencer Strider, I wanted to take some time this week to once again reflect on what has been an incredible start to the season for the other Spencer on the Braves staff. And look, this may not be very much longer that we can say, well, there's Spencer Strider and there's also the other Spencer. It may be, hey, there's Spencer Schwellenbach and Spencer Strider, and they're each their own entity. And I don't think that time is down the road. I think that time is very much now. What we've seen from Spencer Schwellenbach in the early going of the season is precisely what the Braves needed from someone. You wondered who the source was going to be, I think at least a little bit, because you do have Chris Sale, who won a Cy Young last year. You got to put that guy in his own category as well. You have Ronaldo Lopez, who's an all-star. You've got Spencer Strider coming back, and of course Spencer Schwellenbach was getting a lot of talk prior to this season just based on how good his rookie campaign was. However, I don't know that it's even fair for us to raise our expectation level that much more to the dominance that he has shown throughout his first handful of starts this season. Schwellenbach has allowed exactly 1 run. It came on a solo home run from Kyle Schwarber, which is a guy that we know can hit a long ball or two. But outside of that, this has been a tour de force for Schwellenbach to open the year. So it got me wondering. I mean, we can all watch and we can all look at the things that Spencer Schwellenbach does well. And spoiler alert, there's quite a few of those, including the arsenal that he has, that 6-pitch mix, which we're going to talk about a lot here as well. But I kind of wanted to know, what do the other members of the Atlanta Braves think of this young right-hander who's about to turn 25 years old, and the way that he is posting the numbers that he is posting, the way that he goes about it, the player that he is, and what really adds up to the success that he has on the mound, because it's not just one thing. But I do think there were some universal truths in all of that, and the arsenal is what gets everybody's attention. Now, I wrote an article about this for the Marietta Daily Journal this week, just kind of chronicling the, insights of other Braves and how they view Spencer Schwellenbach and the success that he's had, which the club very much needs, and how he goes about doing it. Well, let me share a little something from Braves pitcher Grant Holmes, who can tell you exactly what it is that he sees from Spencer Schwellenbach that sets him apart.
I think it's honestly just the consistency. I feel like he's the same pitcher, every outing. The fastball, command, the velocity, I feel like, the consistency is what makes him so good. And his work ethic. Yeah. He's a hard worker. And he puts a lot of effort into each of his starts and his research and stuff. So I think that's what makes him, really good each and every outing.
From an arsenal standpoint, you know how hard it is to get 2-3 pitches working for you. Mm-hmm. This guy's throwing 6 different pitches, and look at the StatCast data, like 10+% of the time. How uncommon is that?
Yeah, I feel like everything he throws is elite. Mm-hmm. So it's it's kind of like he's got like a little rabbit's foot in his back pocket, like with all those pitches, having only thrown I think he came up with like 2 or 3 pitches. Yeah. And now he's got 6. Yeah. So it's incredible how far he's come. Yeah. Just adding those pitches so recently and how elite they are.
So if you head on over to MLB's StatCast portal and you just start looking at Spencer Schwellenbach's pitch mix, you're going to be amazed, I think, in a number of different ways. Everything that he throws is elite. It's quite the quote from Grant Holmes. But if you really start to break it down, Spencer Schwellenbach has 6 pitches that he can throw to any hitter at any time in virtually any count. It's that arsenal that has hitters trying to guess exactly how it is they're supposed to address him, and I think gives Spencer Schwellenbach the opportunity to, first time through, second time through, third time through the order, maybe even into that fourth time, a chance to look like a completely different arm than he was that first time. Or he can scrap all of that, not really try to live in the deception or the smoke and mirrors, and just say, hey, I know what works for me against certain hitters, and I'm going to go after them that same way until they prove me wrong. And the execution level, the precision, is also something that works extremely well for Spencer Schwellenbach. But I did want to break down the pitch mix before we go any further. Average fastball velocity on his four-seamer, 96.6 miles per hour. That's up half a mile an hour from a year ago. Then he's got his slider, which goes to about 87, a split finger at just under 85, the sinker also nearly 96 miles an hour, a curveball at 80.5 miles per hour, and the cutter at 93.5 miles per hour. He throws each one of those pitches at least 9% of the time based on his most recent start. So the cutter dipped just below the 10% mark, but 32% for the four-seam fastball, nearly 20% for the slider, nearly 16% of the time he'll throw a split finger, almost 13% of the time for the sinker, just over 11% on the curveball, and just over 9% usage on that cutter. 6 pitches, none of them are just to show me. None of them are just something he keeps in his back pocket. All of them can help get him outs in a given day, and all of it adds up to one of the best rounded arsenals that you're going to find. And to me, one of the most fascinating things about that whole arsenal we just talked about, yes, he throws some breaking balls, and they are off speed, but Spencer Schwellenbach doesn't throw a changeup. You would think fastball, changeup, then you've got your breaking balls, but he is not that guy. It's four-seamer, split finger, sinker, and cutter. So 4 different fastballs, a slider, and a curveball. So even in the age of the sweeper, he doesn't throw that either. It's just fascinating for me to see a pitcher that can have so much success without the standard changeup or without the new age sweeper that has been such a big shift in the terminology of how we discuss breaking balls in recent years. So some other things to chew on when it comes to Spencer Schwellenbach. I also wanted to get a little bit of insight from somebody who gets behind the plate and works with Spencer Schwellenbach in a start. So I talked to Braves catcher Drake Baldwin and got his thoughts on how exactly they plan for a lineup and what exactly they do to utilize those 6 pitches, and of course, had to know what he sees from Spencer Schwellenbach that makes him such a special pitcher. Take a listen to my conversation with Drake.
I think part of that is like being a position player his whole life. Like he's had to just stay athletic with how he throws, so he's able to pick up new pitches and kind of get the feels back of how to locate pitches and just kind of stay athletic on the mound rather than being robotic. It's pretty special. With if he throws a bad pitch or like doesn't locate it, he's able to make that adjustment right away and get that next pitch to the right spot. So I think just kind of the credit to his athleticism, and then also being like a shortstop his whole life. I think that helps with not getting too robotic and not thinking too much and just going out there and pitching.
As a catcher, as somebody who's working in a partnership with him, I know you prepare with everybody different ways, the lineups, the scouting reports, all of those things, but knowing that you have somebody with that kind of arsenal, how unique is that to prepare for and execute a game plan?
Yeah, he says he has all 6 pitches to use versus the guys. Like he has 6 pitches, so you can use various pitches for the guys that he thinks he can get them out or get out the easiest with those pitches. So it's not necessarily he has to use all the pitches, but he's very intelligent with how he prepares for the game and scouting reports and stuff like that. And him being able to locate that many pitches, he can do a lot of different things going north, south, east, west, just all parts of the zone. It just keeps a hitter off balance, and it's tough for a hitter to sit on pitches just because he has so many.
I imagine happy you don't have to face him.
Yeah,
game plan
I haven't faced him yet in my spring training career or anything like that, but yeah, I don't really know exactly what I'd do.
I think Drake Baldwin could probably join the club because a lot of hitters out there have pretty much no idea exactly how to approach Spencer Schwellenbach. I would say at bat to at bat, because he does have such a variance. And you heard right there, you can throw 6 pitches, but you don't have to use each one of them every single at bat or show them to every single hitter in the lineup. That just gives you so much variation and so much possibility for how you approach a lineup. And think about it, beyond that, when you're facing, maybe you've got 3-4 starts against a division rival in the course of a season, or you've seen a particular contender that you might be dealing with in October, can you do something different than the last time? I mean, yes, you want to stick with what makes you successful. You don't want to get away from that and be different for the sake of being different. There needs to be a purpose to everything, and I think Drake Baldwin did a really nice job of kind of explaining that and how Spencer Schwellenbach looks at it. But it's all in that mental game, that mental makeup, which I also think that Spencer Schwellenbach has and sets him apart from a lot of other young pitchers. Now, he's 24 years old, so this is another kind of aspect of his career. He had 110 innings of professional experience before he jumped from Double-A to the big leagues with the Braves last year and threw 123 innings. So his career to that point, he was drafted in 2021, had to immediately undergo Tommy John, and then was still working his way through the mid-minors before the Braves felt like, all right, you know what? We've seen enough of this guy to know that there's some possibility there. We're going to give him some run. And that's exactly what they did last year. And at that point, when he came up, and this is kind of the crazy thing about all of it, at least for me, one of the many crazy things about his success, or just at least hard to wrap your head around. I mean, there's certainly been purpose behind all of it, but Spencer Schwellenbach came up and basically was a 3-pitch pitcher. But he continued to evolve throughout the course of his rookie season in the major leagues. Think about all the different prospects and young pitchers that the Braves have trotted up in their system, whether you're talking about Max Fried or Michael Soroka or Kyle Wright or Spencer Strider, Spencer Schwellenbach, Ian Anderson, whoever it is. Now, I want you to think about how some of them had those growing pains. They went up and then back down. They had to overcome injury, which Spencer Schwellenbach has done that as well. But how many of those guys were we talking about? Okay, yeah, they came up. They had a really good arsenal of these couple of pitches. Then they added 4 more. I mean, there was so much talk about Spencer Strider with the potential of adding a curveball to his arsenal last year. Or does he throw his changeup enough? And when I talked to Spencer Strider about it, he said, yes, the changeup is a useful pitch for me. The curveball can be a useful pitch for me. I want to get to the point where I believe in them and I throw them in particular counts to hitters with conviction. But my fastball and slider are what it's all about, so that's what I'm going to work off of. Now, obviously, Spencer Schwellenbach is a fastball slider pitcher as well. He just throws 4 different types of fastballs, and that, I think, is just one of the many things that sets him apart from so many other young pitchers and maybe just so many other arms in Major League Baseball, because I haven't been able to dig through it all, and I'm not even sure what the filter is to find out how many different pitchers in baseball are credited with throwing 5 or 6 pitches. It can't be many. I mean, there may be a decent amount that are throwing some that maybe StatCast data will qualify as this or that maybe really wasn't, but it just kind of fell in those parameters, and they go from a 4th pitch to a 5th pitch. But 6 pitches, at least 9 or 10% of the time, depending on the usage, I guess, of that cutter. It was really the only line of delineation there. But 6 pitches that you'll throw with great frequency. I can't think of too many other guys in baseball that can do that. And that's just one of the many things that makes Spencer Schwellenbach impressive. And it's something that catches the attention of just about every single one of his Braves teammates, including Austin Riley, who talked about it prior to Thursday's game against the Philadelphia Phillies.
Pitches he has that able to, they're all really good pitches, and able to locate them, throw them wherever he wants, comfortable with them. He's kind of, to be so young to be able to do that, I think that's what's most impressive. And a series tied 1-1, and that's who I want on the mound. So
I think that is anything is the kind of ringing endorsement that lets you know where the Braves view Spencer Schwellenbach. We can all see it from the outside. The numbers don't lie, as the old Scott Steiner promo goes, but they spell disaster for opposing hitters, more so than anybody. But having a teammate say, that's the guy I want on the mound, and the Braves have a couple of those guys, I think, with Chris Sale, with Spencer Schwellenbach, with Spencer Strider coming back into the mix. They've got some guys, but Spencer Schwellenbach, in a very short amount of time, has put himself in pretty elite company. And I think that's just one of the many things that stands out about this young right-hander, his success, and how exactly he's gotten it all done. So that's kind of a deep dive into Spencer Schwellenbach and the views of some of his Braves teammates on what makes him so successful. And we're all looking forward to seeing what this kid can do over the course of 2025, as he has already established himself on a very short list of the best pitchers in baseball so far on the young season. When we come back, we will turn our attention to what else is going on across Major League Baseball as we take our trip around the big leagues. It comes your way next, right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday as we close out our weekend and we take our trip around the big leagues to discuss some of the other things going on across Major League Baseball, not related to the Atlanta Braves, at least for the most part. I found some interesting stuff, as I always do, and one gentleman found a whole big pile of money, and he found it in Toronto. That's where the Atlanta Braves are heading, where they will see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the Toronto Blue Jays for the next 3 days. So we will get to see Mr. Guerrero, who is the most recent $500 million man in Major League Baseball. His contract signed this past week became official. $325 million signing bonus for this $500 million deal. And I don't know that we have enough time in the segment for me to break down all of the contract minutia that goes into this, but it is a uniquely structured contract. 15 years worth of installments for this thing, which will pay him down through 2039. So that $325 million is coming his way. It is a signing bonus, but it's not coming his way at once. So that in and of itself I thought was kind of interesting. Because if they're just going to cut you a $325 million check on day one, I mean, where do I sign up? A lot of players, I'm sure, probably thinking the same thing, but you got to have the requisite skills, and you've got to have a team that's interested in having you around for a long time, which clearly the Blue Jays are with Guerrero, who's an MVP caliber player and candidate at best, but has also had some ups and downs in his career production-wise. But overall, I think for the Blue Jays, this move was multifaceted because they have been perceived, and I don't know that this is fair, as a club that's missed out on some big free agents. None, I think, more, I don't know if egregious is the word, but none more strangely covered than the flight to Toronto for Shohei Ohtani that was not a flight to Toronto for Shohei Ohtani, who ended up signing with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And they've also lost out on a couple of other big-name free agents. But they kind of find themselves in the boat that a lot of other clubs, 29 other clubs to be exact, find themselves in. When the Dodgers key in on a player that they really want, they're going to outspend anybody, pretty much. I mean, if they're really going after him, I don't know of too many pursuits that the Dodgers have just not been able to bring to fruition, and nothing, I think, underscores it more than the Ohtani deal, which you talk about unique contracts. $700 million with $680 million deferred. Well, if you're making tens of millions, if not more, in endorsements every year, I guess you don't need your paycheck from the team. You can just pick that thing up later. But for Guerrero, he's going to get a bunch of that up front, I guess, over the next 15 years, though it's still coming on an annual basis. So signing bonus, no signing bonus. It also had that one other little caveat that I don't know how many baseball people really want to think about, but clearly Guerrero's representation did. If there's a work stoppage in 2026, Blue Jays are still going to cut him a $14 million check. So he's not going to be sitting there wondering where the money is, while everybody else has figured out where's the money going to come from and how we're going to structure this whole thing. And that's a topic maybe to save for another day, but there's a very real possibility just based on the trajectory of these two sides, Major League Baseball's lust for a salary cap for the owner's side and the players' union very much not being interested in that kind of thing. It could be and probably will be a lot more contentious than this last one, which resulted in a lockout by the owners of the players after the 2021 World Series, which I'm sure we all remember. But I think for the Blue Jays and for Vlad Guerrero, this is a deal that makes a lot of sense, but it is a ton of money to spend on a DH-type hitter because he's a decent first baseman, not a great one. I don't think first baseman, when you look at the metrics, it really speaks too highly of their defensive value overall. But I think that we could agree, just based on a number of factors, including his body type, which, just being fair, over the next 14 years, it's not inconceivable that he would end up being a DH. And a DH making $500 million, and I'm not talking about Ohtani, who could play the outfield or who could end up pitching and probably will. He threw another bullpen session this past week. That's a whole different animal. But Guerrero, again, is an MVP caliber player, and I think the Blue Jays very much needed to secure their franchise so that they'd have that kind of player to build around, and that's what they did this past week. But it brought up an interesting question. I saw this on CBS Sports, and I don't know what the answer to this one is, particularly because Bobby Witt's already signed an extension and it didn't get to $500 million. But who is the next $500 million player out there? And I think it's an interesting question for a number of different reasons and for a couple of factors that it goes into getting $500 million, at least for right now. You have to time it right in terms of coming to the big leagues at 20 or 21 years old, pushing yourself into free agency at, 26, 27, maybe 28 years old, and having that 12 to 14 or more years available where a club could say, all right, well, we can sign him for the rest of his career. We'll look forward to the first 6-7 years of being great production, and we'll figure out the back half of it because, spoiler alert, that's what all these deals are. Because Father Time is undefeated. And some of these players, they may age pretty well, but you're never going to be in your late 30s or early 40s what you were in your late 20s and early 30s. So let's just throw all that out there. But Juan Soto leads the pack here with $765 million that he got from the Mets over 13 years. Then you've got Ohtani, $700 million over 10 years. But a lot of that's deferred. But still, he's getting $700 million from the Dodgers. He's a two-way player, though. So you thought unique contract, will we ever see another $700 million deal? As a matter of fact, it didn't take very long. So the Mets, very aggressive with Juan Soto, who could also end up, and I'm sure will, at some point in the back half of that contract, end up being a DH. Then you got Vlad Guerrero at $500 million over 14 years. Mike Trout at $426.5 million over 12 years. And I think that would have been a relative bargain just based on who he was until the injuries cropped up. And those injuries can happen to anybody at any time, as we've learned. And Trout, hopefully, knock on wood, can stay healthy and get back on that Hall of Fame track because there are very few players, I can count them on one hand, that are more complete, more exciting, and more impactful than Mike Trout has been in his young career. And if he didn't play another game, the guy's going into Cooperstown, and that says a lot about what he was able to do over that first decade. But putting that aside, who are the guys that could, at least as of right now, guys that have debuted that we know are in the major leagues that could move themselves towards a big contract, maybe be the next $500 million man? CBS had a list of these, and I'm going to throw a few of them out there. Gunnar Henderson of the Baltimore Orioles I thought was an interesting one. He came up at 21. He played at a pretty star level, an MVP level last year. If he keeps that up, I think you could see a 27, 28-year-old Gunnar Henderson getting a huge offer. When you factor in what's going on 5 or 6 years from now, and let me just go ahead and go back. Let me backtrack. Let me say, let's put the work stoppage talks aside, the salary cap talks aside, just under the current system, if somebody can get $500 million, Gunnar Henderson's a decent candidate. Ellie De La Cruz was the other one that jumped off the page because this is one of the most exciting, toolsy players that you're going to see. I mean, electric is what this guy is. But can he put it all together and have these monster seasons that gets him that monster contract? I think that's still to be determined. But he's certainly a candidate for that. And then there's a couple that I just couldn't buy. The first one is Kyle Tucker. And not because he's not a good slugger and a nice player and has had a very good career for the Astros and now the Cubs, but he's going to be a free agent at 29 years old. And I'm just not sure a $500 million deal is out there for him. He just doesn't strike me as that franchise fix-your huge move kind of way. Now, could he get a $300 million deal, which is still absurd to talk about? But yes, I think he could. Then we'll find out, I think, in free agency or if the Cubs maybe decide to back up the Brinks truck and extend him. I don't know. The other was Paul Skeens. And as exciting and fun as it is to watch Paul Skeens, and he is hands down one of the most electric pitchers that you're going to find, to use that word again, I just don't know when a pitcher is going to get that $500 million contract because of the volatility of pitching in general. Because all it takes, as we've seen, I mean, Garrett Cole's a good example of this, and he's the highest paid pitcher ever, over $300 million in his deal with the Yankees, which he renegotiated last year, and now he's missing a season with Tommy John. And what Garrett Cole are you going to get on the other side of that? I just feel like that's a gambit and maybe a bridge too far for a lot of clubs. So a $500 million pitcher, I don't know about that. So the other one I had to ask myself, and do this thought exercise and bring it back to the Braves, Ronald Acuña Jr. Is this a guy who could get a $500 million contract? If we're talking about talent, he absolutely could. Now, clearly, and this is not to get off on the tangent of the extension that he signed, which was under very different circumstances because a lot has changed since Acuña signed his deal in early 2019 and what we've seen in both extensions and free agent contracts, which I can't stress enough, there's a difference between the two, even if some of the money in some of these doesn't make it seem like it is. But things changed a lot when Fernando Tatis got his huge contract from the San Diego Padres, and clearly with the Juan Soto deal and with the Shohei Ohtani deal, a lot of things in free agency have certainly changed as well, and throw Vlad Guerrero Jr. on that list. But for Acuña, with an extension, it still feels like a stretch. And why do I say that? Because he's due $17 million in 2025, $17 million more in 2026. Then the Braves have not 1 but 2 years of team options for $17 million per season. So Acuña, with 2025, 26, 27, and 28, could end up costing the Braves $68 million. Just to throw it out there, Shohei Ohtani, even though the money's deferred, has an annual average value of his contract of $70 million. That's how absurd that deal is. That's 4 years of Acuña for 1 year of Ohtani. If I'm a team, I like those odds. Could the Braves look to extend him at some point? We'll see. But it's not going to be, I think, on the horizon immediately. But Acuña did say last year, obviously before the injury and everything that happened in 2024, that he'd like to remain a Brave. He's made no secret about that. And we'll see if those two sides are able to come together. And a lot of this is going to be determined by how healthy Ronald can be, how productive he can be, and then see if the Braves want to get into that whole extension train and make another stop by Ronald Acuña Jr. and have him be a Brave for life, because I think a lot of people would definitely love to see that. So that's a little bit of thoughts about the $500 million men, and Vlad Guerrero is just the third in baseball history to get to that number. I want to get into something else a little bit interesting for all the wrong reasons. The Pittsburgh Pirates, a couple of stories this past week that really don't make you feel great about that club, as if you already didn't feel great about the fact that they've pretty much, from an ownership perspective, just decided to just accept their fate of just never really being a club that's going to spend and build and be a contender. So even if they do have a Paul Skeens come along, even if they do have a couple of playoff appearances about 10 years ago now, they're just not going to continue to put into it to create the continuity as far as that is concerned. But they made some headlines by removing their Roberto Clemente tribute in right field. It was this big logo that was on the wall. It had been out there for several years. It disappeared at the start of 2025, and in its place was a big can for, I believe, a malt beverage or something that was up in its place. That was noticed on April the 4th, and once it hit social media and went viral, I think the Pirates got the message pretty loud and clear that, hey, that right fielder, Roberto Clemente, or that right field tribute for their great right fielder, Pirates fans would like to see that back. And so on April the 8th, that sign for Roberto Clemente, that tribute, that was once again in the right field corner, and I guess they relocated that can advertisement. And so I guess that's a partial win. But the fact that that stuff even has to happen and be pointed out that, hey, you know what? Maybe with all of the other space that's available in the stadium, put the ad someplace else. You got a nice little tribute going for one of the great players in the game, somebody who's honored throughout the game for his humanitarian efforts that put him on a plane in which his life ended because of his desire to help others. Maybe don't replace him by an advertisement. Just a thought. And then if you thought it couldn't get much worse, there was this story about the Bucco bricks. And for Braves fans who are familiar with Truist Park, you can buy a brick from the Braves, from the Braves Foundation. I don't know how much it is now, but let's just say it's $100, $150, $200. I don't know. Whatever the price is, you make your own. But you pay that to the team, and they, in turn, go and put your brick on a sidewalk that leads into or around the ballpark. It's a pretty straightforward transaction, and a lot of Braves fans I know thought that was a pretty great thing to be a part of the ballpark, a place that they love, a team that they love, and Pirates fans were much the same, and they called these Bucco bricks. And it made the news this past week that a huge amount of these Bucco bricks showed up at Reserve Township in a recycling center going into a landfill, because the Pirates had decided to change the sidewalk, and instead of retaining those bricks that they sold to fans to be a part of the ballpark, and I don't know what the contract was for these things, but again, the optics are pretty poor, they decided to take these fans' hard-earned money and take these bricks and not even offer them back to the fans, but to just toss them in a landfill. So I don't know what you can really say about that other than I can completely understand why some fans were not very excited about that. And the Pirates continue to take L's, as the kids might say. One last story before we get out of here. Mark Rippiger on Thursday, Major League Baseball umpire behind the plate for the Royals against the Twins. He called a perfect game. But how did he do it if the Kansas City Royals won by a 3-2 score? I'm glad you asked, because according to pitch tracking data, Rippiger didn't miss a single call behind home plate. As far as balls and strikes were concerned, it's just the second perfect game called in the pitch tracking era. 136 pitches, and he called them all perfectly according to pitch tracks. The other perfect game came in the World Series in 2023, Game 2 of the World Series. Pat Hoberg, who was unfortunately fired by Major League Baseball for his ties to gambling earlier this year. So no good deed goes unpunished. And those are a few stories on our trip around the big leagues. When we come back, we will turn our attention back to the weekend for the Braves. Unfortunately ended in a 2-out-of-3 series loss against the Tampa Bay Rays. But my buddy Neil Solondz, who calls the games on radio for the Rays, will join us next to talk about what's going on down in Tampa as far as their baseball situation this year. It's certainly a unique one. And you'll hear that conversation next right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
love baseball. Now back to more Graham McAuley and From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9, The Game.
Back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. As we continue our trip around the big leagues, we're going to head on back down to Florida where the Braves and Rays wrapped up their weekend series to check in with a buddy of mine. His name is Neil Solondz. He is one of the play-by-play voices for the Tampa Bay Rays radio broadcast, and he was on the call this weekend as these two teams met at George M. Steinbrenner Field, the spring training home of the New York Yankees. Well, Neil, I appreciate you making some time to join me, and I know this is a different kind of season for the Tampa Bay Rays. No two ways about it. I know there's a lot that goes into putting together a club, but most times you don't have to wonder, where are we going to be playing this year? So thanks for making the time, and how goes the first couple of weeks of the 2025 season?
You know, I think in terms of logistics, it's about as good as it can be expected, and I appreciate having me on.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think with all the challenges, I think the staff has been absolutely amazing. You know, you had about 3 to 4 days to get the stadium ready after the last Yankee spring training game to prepare this to be the Rays' home field, and it really does feel like the Rays' home field. I think the energy in the building has been wonderful. I think the baseball staff itself has done everything to get their guys ready to play on a daily basis. It's a terrific clubhouse with great staff there. And, you know, you just hope that as you go through the season, the team just continues to grow and evolve. And play better baseball as we go, and hopefully it'll be an entertaining year all the way around the board.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously is the plan. And here in the first couple of weeks, I know they say that, you know, that you can't win the division in April, but you can certainly lose it in April, I think is probably the flip side of that coin. And the Braves are kind of going through it here in the early going. But I want to ask you a little bit about where the Rays are here in 2025, because missing the postseason last year, that snapped a 5-year streak of making it to October. So where do the Rays look to adjust the roster, and where do you think they are in what is annually one of baseball's toughest divisions, if not the toughest division in baseball?
I mean, first, I will say on the Braves, I know you mentioned the concern in Atlanta. I think sometimes there's too much made of that, because I think people forget that Houston was 12-24 last year and ended up winning the division. And the year the Braves won the World Series, only a few years ago, it really wasn't until about the 105 game mark that they consistently were above 500. So sometimes those early portions of the schedule, a little too much is made. Every game counts, yes, but it's really how you're playing and how healthy you are down the stretch. I think for this group, one of the challenges is that the schedule is front-loaded with a lot of home games. And so you want home to be a place where you pick up a lot of victories, and it's also a new home. And it's not like you had, let's say, for instance, in 2023, when the Rays got off to a 13-0 start, they ended up playing most of their spring training at Tropicana Field at the time, because they had another hurricane that took out their Port Charlotte facility that year, and they ended up doing some of spring in Orlando and the rest Tropicana Field. So they had already played a month of games at Tropicana Field before the regular season started, and I think that helped. You know, this is a very unique ballpark in terms of it doesn't have a second deck. The ball's going to carry extremely well, as we saw the first couple games of the Braves series and really the last 3 against the Angels. So I think the Rays are still built around pitching and defense. And when you pitch extremely well, you're going to get good results. Drew Rasmussen has gotten that. Taj Bradley has gotten that. Pete Fairbanks has gotten good results, but you still have to make really good quality pitches. I think that this is a group that should be good if healthy. The challenge is getting as healthy as possible, as quickly as possible. You know, they lost Shane McClanahan to an injury right before he was to make the opening day start. They're missing 3 of their outfielders at this point that we speak, and they're about to get one back, hopefully before the homestand ends. But they've got a couple relievers down too that they were expecting to be on the roster. And so it's how do you navigate those injuries and how do you handle it? And I think if they can and get healthy, I still think that this is a team that can get back to the postseason for the 6th time in 7 years.
Yeah, and when they expanded the postseason, that also gives a little bit of hope that if you do get things right at the right time and get hot at the right time, that, hey, maybe you'll be that club that comes into October with a little bit of that momentum that everybody is obviously looking for that time of year. Now, on the outside, I think all of us kind of marvel and how the Rays annually build their contender with some obvious constraints that go into that. And it's not easy, but they seemingly have found a way more times than not to do that. How would you describe where this club is on the whole this year? Because I know that the names change, but the goal, obviously, and the results speak for themselves.
They do. I think obviously there's been a lot of continuity and consistency. I mean, having Kevin Cash as the longest tenured manager, most of his staff has been here throughout, and if not throughout every single year he's been here, they've been there through a majority. And the other constant has been Eric Neander, the head of baseball operations. And there are a lot of people underneath him who've been here for a long time as well, whether it's Kevin Ibach, whether it's Will Cousins, whether it's Carlos Rodriguez or Chanda Loudermilk. Most of the folks in that top group, Bobby Heck included, have all been here for a bit. So there's consistency and continuity there. And I think they've done a good job finding athletic players, players who want to get better, players who I think fit their organization really well. And I think they've even done that not only through trades and draft, but free agency too. I'm anxious to see whenever Ha-Sung Kim joins the team, how he's going to fit in because he's a defensive player. He's a dynamic player. He's an energy player who runs the bases extremely well. I think Danny Jansen is going to fit in here well over the long haul. And I think he's starting to find himself offensively, and I think he'll be do a really good job with the pitching staff. And they're really selective on their free agents. And I think especially with this unique season, you're going to be playing in a venue that you hadn't played in before. You're going to have to deal with the heat of summer, even though you're going to play more games on the road in the second half of the season. And Danny Jansen has been there, done that, because the Blue Jays had that coming out of the pandemic, where they had to play in Dunedin and Buffalo and play in unique venues. And I think he's the right kind of leader. And Ha-Sung Kim wanted to come here. And I think you want guys who want to be here, and those guys fit. And then you've got another group that of the players who are coming back that were all extremely determined to get back to the postseason, and that's their focus. And most prognosticators did pick them more in the bottom half of the division than the top half, and I think that's a motivation for this group. And now it's just a matter of playing well enough to get where you want to go.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Chatting with Neil Solondz, who's one of the voices of the Tampa Bay Rays. He joins me on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game via the WadeFord.com hotline. And you brought up something really interesting there, I think, with the prognostication. And yeah, maybe you are in the middle to bottom half of the division, but I think there's typically going to be three teams that come out of the AL East every year, and the Rays have shown that they can certainly take one of those spots, if not win the entire division, despite what other competition is out there vying for that. This does, though, to me, feel a little bit more like the potential of a youth movement right now, even by the Rays standards. So who could you kind of factor in this year as some of the young players, some of the prospects that could really make an impact in 2025?
There are a lot of them. Some of them are guys who've had an opportunity earlier and maybe it didn't work out. I look at a guy like Jonathan Aranda, who's off to a really good start and was offensively was probably a top 100 prospect in the game, and then fractured his finger in spring training last year. And his last month was really good. So now he gets his first full season and he's off to a tremendous start. Junior Caminero, he's not a rookie anymore, but he's 21 and it's the first full season. Christopher Morel is still 25 years of age and has been a 20 homer guy multiple occasions with the Cubs. And now he's trying to right himself. And those are some really important players. Josh Lowe has been a 2030 guy. He got hurt earlier this year. He's going to be back at some point. I think he's going to be an important player. But there are also some younger players who are in Durham right now. Probably the name that comes to mind quickly is a guy played at Georgia Tech in Chandler Simpson, who was drafted by the Rays, who was a 100 stolen base guy last year, who I think certainly has the ability to impact this club at some point this year. And I think there are probably others on the offensive side, but I think also the pitching side. Joe Boyle, who they acquired from the A's in the Jeffrey Springs deal, comes to mind. And there's some unique arms in AAA, like a kid like Ben Peoples, who's got a really big fastball that cuts a lot, who I think could impact this group at some point. So I think you're going to see, in any season, you're probably going to need 50 players to get to the postseason. Yeah. And, we're always hyper-focused in the early going on who are the 26th that start the year. But sometimes it's more important who do you finish the year with and in what kind of shape are those guys. So hopefully all the guys who contribute do something to help this team win enough games to get in to be one of those 12 teams.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and something Brian Snicker points out in his club meeting with his team on the first couple of days of spring training is, look, this is how many pitchers we use, this is how many position players we used. Inside the pitchers, he'll tell you how many starters the Braves had to use, and that's just one of the things that I think goes with the marathon that is the 162. And to your point, it's not how you start, but how you finish, and also it's not who you start with, but who you finish with as well. And the Rays seem to be a club that always seems to find the pieces to fit in that end up being complementary, whether that's the right trade, the right free agent, really zeroing in and keying in on guys that can thrive there. And that, I think, is one of the hallmarks of why they are where they are seemingly on an annual basis. Now, I hate to do this, but we do have to talk about the elephant in the room a little bit. We talked a little bit about playing at Steinbrenner Field, and we can get to the Trop more in a little while, but what has this process been like? I mean, on your side, on the player side? I know that this is a spring training park for the Yankees, no less, so it's certainly nice, but we all know spring training parks aren't built for 81 games, so what have you noticed about upgrades and changes and things meant to make this feel a little bit more like home for the Tampa Bay Rays than the spring training home of the New York Yankees?
I will say, first of all, the Yankees have been wonderful in terms of sharing a facility like this, and you probably know this, Grant, from your time down in the Tampa Bay area, that the Yankees facility is the largest of any spring training facility in the state of Florida. So from a seating capacity, it's going to allow the most seats of any place that the Rays could have gone to. And fortunately, it's in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
In terms of the facilities for the players, the clubhouse had just been upgraded. And I would say that the home clubhouse that the Rays use is probably on par with any in Major League Baseball right now. Because remember that in spring training, you're usually building a facility for 60 plus people. Mm-hmm. And now in a regular season, you have 26 players, maybe 32 if you're looking at guys who are on the IL and coming in and out. But this has way more lockers, way more space, incredible facilities for eating, for training, for whatever purposes you need, along with the fact that you have backfields out there if you need to do some work or additional cages. So it's as high end a facility as you're going to have for baseball players to get ready for their given games in a given day. So from that standpoint, I think that makes it a really positive home field. And now it's a matter of really getting comfortable and taking advantage of the ballpark. I think the Rays were probably built more for Tropicana Field, using their athleticism on turf, having a younger club. Now they're on grass in a facility that certainly is playing much smaller and much more of a hitter's ballpark than pitchers. But I definitely think they have the personnel to take advantage of that. And it's just a matter of making those adjustments.
Yeah, and that truly is something that you'll sort out over the course of the 81 games there, though you mentioned the schedule is very unique. If something can be very unique, it's either unique or it's not, but it certainly is with all the home games that are pushed into the early part of the schedule. But some time to figure all of that stuff out, most certainly, and who doesn't mind a little bit of extra offense if that comes with it? Well, maybe the Rays pitching staff, I don't know. But either way, it usually evens itself out. So let me ask this. What is the status of Tropicana Field? I know the plan is to fix the roof, obviously. That'll cost some money, time, energy, all of those things. But I guess the big takeaway is this has negatively affected the plans for the Rays ballpark in that situation, which continues to be a saga which sadly just stretches on and on and on with seemingly no real end in sight.
There's not, I mean, the plan is to get it renovated, and this is under the city. It's the city that has the responsibility under the terms of the lease to get it ready for 2026. The expectation or hope is that the Rays will be there on opening day. And I'll let people smarter than I figure out all of the details surrounding that. But the Rays are working with not only the city, but also Major League Baseball is involved. So I think the goal is to have opening day of 2026 back at Tropicana Field, and the Rays would then have 3 years to play in that facility. In terms of the process and how all that goes, I worry most about today's game and today's broadcast, and worry about this season. And I learn as you do. When something becomes official, I know about it, and I hate to be so cliche, but it's very much like a player who's in tunnel vision. Let's worry about this at bat. Let's worry about this day's game. Let's worry about the next pitch. Because I think that's the best way to handle what's in front of you. And I remember, I was a tennis player at times in high school, not a very good one, but I had a coach who always said, don't live your life in triplicate. If you're worried about the point before and the current point and the upcoming point, hey, if I'm down love 15, if I tie this, I'm at 15 all, and what am I going to do for the next point? Well, then you're going to lose the point you're playing. And I think that's the most important thing for myself and everyone involved is just worry about the current moment. And if you do that, I think you're going to enjoy the season and have a lot more success.
Yeah, I think baseball, as much as anything, is about controlling the controllables. And I know you, I, and a whole bunch of other people just enjoy the fact that we can go to a baseball park, watch a Major League Baseball game, get paid to talk about a Major League Baseball game. That's a pretty good deal. So I appreciate you making the time to talk about some Major League Baseball with me as the Rays and the Braves have their weekend clash down at Steinbrenner Field in Tampa. Neil, always great to catch up with you. Look forward to doing it again later in the season. Thank you so much for all your time.
Of course, Grant, take care, and good luck to you guys the rest of the year.
He's Neil Solondz of Tampa Bay Rays Radio. You can find him on social media at Neil Solondz. That's SOLONDZ. And I encourage you to do that. He is one of the good guys in baseball, and always a pleasure to catch up with my buddy Neil. All right, when we come back, we will turn our attention back to the Atlanta Braves, and the next stop of their road trip is a 3-game series against the Toronto Blue Jays. We'll discuss that and more next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Now, back to more From the Diamond. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back in one more time to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday as we close out the show and close out the weekend where the Braves lost 2 out of 3 to the Tampa Bay Rays, and now they will have to, I don't know if pull themselves up by the bootstraps is the right phrase here, but they're going to have to do something and find a little bit of motivation, a little bit of offense as they roll into Toronto to face the Blue Jays in a 3-game series that begins on Monday. And the Blue Jays are the first-place club in the American League East right now. And after just seeing the Tampa Bay Rays, a club that's now 7-8 after taking 2 out of 3 from the Braves, a team that we just heard from Neil Solondz, one of the radio voices for Tampa Bay. This is a club that usually pieces it together just about every year. Missing the playoffs last year is an outlier for them. You knew they were going to be competitive, but the Braves, in a lot of ways, they kind of beat themselves in some of these games, and I think Sunday was another example of that. There were some opportunities offensively, and clearly a bad start from Chris Sale and a rough day for the bullpen. Junior Caminero with that 3-run homer that highlighted, I believe, a 4-run 6th inning that put the Rays ahead for good. It just kind of felt like a backbreaker right there. But either way, they got to deal with the Blue Jays, who are 9-7. As they come into Monday. And the Blue Jays are going to be a tough club in their own ballpark. And you'll be seeing Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who we talked about a little bit earlier, new $500 million man, leading the way there. The Braves, though, they'll continue that road trip and obviously another chance to get right. As I talked about, the 0-7 start is what it is. The Braves since then have been a 500 club. They split a series against the Marlins with a doubleheader later in the year to kind of, I guess, decide that one. Then you take 2 out of 3 from the Phillies, and you're kind of a thin margin away from having a chance to sweep that series if the middle game had gone better. And then you outlast a long rain delay, and you win in dramatic fashion in extra innings. That had to give you a jolt. And then you lose 2 out of 3 to the Tampa Bay Rays. So you're kind of one step forward, one step back lately. But 500 feels a lot better than 0-7. But when you add it all up for the Braves, it's not anywhere close to where they need it to be, as Atlanta, after taking the loss, drops to 4-11 on the year. Pittsburgh Pirates are also an 11-loss club at 5-11, and then the Rockies have the worst record in the National League. They're now 3-12. So the Braves have managed to get away from the dubious distinction of having the worst record in the National League, if not the worst record in baseball, because there is a 4-11 White Sox team and a 5-11 Twins team that the Braves will be seeing once they get back to Truist Park. But let's not bury the lead about this Toronto series and talk around it in circles anymore. Spencer Strider rejoining the Braves rotation, that is something sorely needed. You need more offense, yes, but you also need to get this starting rotation right. I think Chris Sale's going to figure it out. I am going to say that before I jump into the Spencer Strider of it all. Because Sale, there were a lot of questions about the velocity his last time out. I think he answered those in this one, but just not able to get the results that he wants to get. But Chris Sale, if you've met him or heard from him in any way, shape, or form, ultra competitive, and also took some serious accountability for not helping the Braves out on Sunday and losing that game. But either way, I think he's going to get it right. So now you start building on Chris Sale, on Spencer Schwellenbach, who we talked a lot about earlier in the show. And Spencer Strider is the next piece of that puzzle, and the Braves are looking to put him back in to their rotation. It'll be his first chance to pitch in a Braves uniform in a regular season game since April the 5th of last year when he made just 2 starts and underwent that UCL brace procedure. So now you can put him alongside Sale and Schwellenbach, and that's a pretty nice trio. You're still figuring out 4 and 5. I think A.J. Smith-Shawver has a role to play in one of those 2 spots. Grant Holmes, for right now, I talked to him this past week. You heard a little bit from him earlier as well. Getting to that 100-pitch mark was pretty meaningful for him, according to Grant Holmes. And I talked about this with Dukes and Bell earlier this week. He had not thrown 100 pitches in a start since 2016. Now, I didn't go through every game log. I took his word for it. But the fact that it had been so long since he'd thrown 100 pitches in a game, but he was able to do it this past time out. He said, no, look, that's my goal every time now. I want to go 100 pitches. I want to give my team as many innings as I can. And obviously the focus is on starting right now. So whether he holds down the 5th spot or he ends up in the bullpen helping out, which obviously we could talk about that. The bullpen could use some help. We'll see. But getting Spencer Strider back in there is going to be a huge boost for this club if he's anything close to the pitcher that, A, we've seen for years, and B, which is kind of A right now because we want to be in the moment, the guy who made those 3 rehab starts and absolutely dominated at AAA Gwinnett. 5 1/3 innings his last time out. He did allow a run, but he set a Stripers record with 13 strikeouts, and I think could have had a 14th if he hadn't hit that 90th pitch, and that was his pitch count. And they're not going to have him throw one more pitch for people who asked, oh, what's it matter if he throws 92 or 93 or 94? No, 90 pitches, that's the mission. He completed the mission. He struck out 13. He looks great. The object was to throw a side on Sunday and then get him back in there, I believe, on a Wednesday against the Toronto Blue Jays to make his first start in a Braves uniform. What's the rest of the rotation going to look like after that? Talked about that a little bit. A.J. Smith-Shawver kind of turned it around, I felt like, in his start against the Rays on Saturday. He got through 5 innings, 2-run ball, piled up some strikeouts, but then he got optioned to AAA Gwinnett. And I had a lot of people kind of wondering, all right, well, why are you optioning him out? And I think this is as simple as trying to do a little bit of roster management. And I don't always understand the why behind some of these moves. But I think we're going to see A.J. Smith-Shawver back when the Braves have more of a need for a 5th starter. So if that's a little bit later this month, because they do have some off days built in, I think you could see him back. You can also see a move in which somebody lands on the injured list and you're able to recall A.J. Smith-Shawver even though you optioned him out. Now, the question around Bryce Elder and why he's still on the roster, I think the short-term answer is he could give you some innings if you needed him to because he was just one day ahead of where A.J. Smith-Shawver is. So if you needed a couple of innings in this series against Toronto, I guess that's where you turn for him. But in terms of, Bryce Elder's overall spot in the Braves rotation, I think it's fair to question that at this point. And what exactly are the Braves hoping to see out of him? I guess really anything that they can. But right now, just according to the Braves official site, when you look at the probable pitchers for the Toronto series, you get Grant Holmes in Game 1, Spencer Schwellenbach in Game 2, TBD in Game 3, which is Wednesday, which I think the expectation is that'll be Spencer Strider. Then you have an off day. Then the Minnesota Twins come to Truist Park on Friday night to open up a 3-game weekend series. So we'll see at that point maybe where Bryce Elder, falls into all of this. But I think he's really here right now to throw multiple innings if a game gets out of hand and you need somebody to cover some frames for you, save the bullpen, that kind of thing. He's kind of like when you look around that room and you see that fire extinguisher on the wall. That's more or less what I think it is, an emergency role, just in case you need him. But I would like to see A.J. Smith-Shawver get a little bit more opportunity. And we've seen and talked about, and I got into this a little bit earlier, when just development of young pitchers in general, Spencer Schwellenbach being so far ahead of the curve, no pun intended, with the way that he has gone about it with his 6 different pitches. Not everybody has that. Spencer Schwellenbach throws a split-finger fastball. So does A.J. Smith-Shawver. But A.J. Smith-Shawver throws a split finger about 30% of the time. That's normal fastball usage for most players. And yes, it's a variety of a fastball, but he throws a lot of splitters, I guess is my point. Whereas Spencer Schwellenbach throws a lot of four-seamers, and then he mixes in 5 other things, including a splitter. And not everybody's going to be able to be judged by that or through that lens because not everybody can do what Schwellenbach is doing. That's what makes it impressive. But I do think that with the big fastball that Smith-Shawver has and that splitter and his breaking ball offerings, this is a kid that he's still pretty young. Could put some things together, but he's got the high-octane arm. That's why you saw him get the opportunity against San Diego. And I know that didn't go well in the wild card series last year, but that's why he got that call. It's why they added him to the postseason roster a couple of years ago against the Phillies, because big stuff, you believe, can play. And I think Smith-Shawver, the more that he gets to develop and the more he gets to learn, which would be helpful at the big league level at this point, as the club's fifth starter, de facto or otherwise, that's going to benefit him in the long run. Ronaldo Lopez, we talked about him last week, but just in case you have kind of not heard or maybe just need to have this as proper context for this rotation, he underwent a cleanup procedure on his right shoulder. So he got his scope done. It didn't reveal any major structural damage, but he's going to be shut down for 12 weeks. And at that point, the Braves will start to map out, where he is and if he can pitch again here in 2025. That obviously is not great news, but they didn't close the door completely to him pitching again this year. But he's not going to be factoring in anytime soon, and that's a big loss. An all-star pitcher a year ago who, even if he did miss some starts here and there, you were hoping to get some pretty good production out of him this year. Now that's just not going to happen. And when you compound that on losing, 40% of your starting five from a year ago on opening day, even when you get Spencer Strider back, it does feel like, as you look back, and hindsight's not going to help at all, but it's just worth pointing out, again, for the context, if nothing else, not adding a veteran starter in the offseason does feel like somewhere that the Braves missed. And they did try to add in that rotation, but they just didn't get it done yet. So will that be the top priority come the trade deadline? And we're a long way from the trade deadline. We're an even longer way from October. And at 4-11, I don't think that the Braves are necessarily thinking about, well, who's going to be starting postseason games for us? But they do want to make that happen. So they got to start playing some better baseball. But when we do start to think about where they could add, where they may need to add, I think starting pitcher has remained on that list, and that list was written sometime around last October. So putting all of that aside, we'll see. We talked about Spencer Schwellenbach quite a bit earlier in the show, and he's going to be a feature arm with Strider and Sale. Sale not as effective today, but I'm just not really that worried about him. Not yet anyway, especially with the velocity ticking back up. That was the big question mark. Was there going to be a loss of velocity that he was dealing with over multiple starts? It doesn't really look like it, so we'll see. So the Braves and Blue Jays will open up their series on Monday at Rogers Center. 7:07 the first pitch. Going to be Grant Holmes against Easton Lucas, the lefty for the Blue Jays. He's 2-0. Has not allowed an earned run yet this year. Holmes has made a couple of starts, 0-1 with an ERA of 4. Then you got Spencer Schwellenbach against Kevin Gossman, the former Brave. And Kevin Gossman, man, that guy, once he left Atlanta, got into San Francisco where they had a little bit of a run there. And I don't know if the Giants are still doing this or not. I think Justin Verlander might have gone there hoping they would. But you can really rejuvenate a pitching career out in San Francisco. Gossman certainly did. And he got some big money from the Blue Jays to hang out there. He's 1-1 with a 2.33 ERA, a great strikeout pitcher. Speaking of split-finger fastballs, he certainly has one of those. He'll be facing Spencer Schwellenbach. That should be a really, really good pitching matchup. Then you get Chris Bassett against Spencer Strider is the expectation. Again, has not been announced by the Braves, but Wednesday, that's where Strider would line up to pitch for Atlanta. And he'd do so on 5 days rest based on his last rehab start against for the Gwinnett Stripers, in which he struck out 13 batters in 5 1/3 innings. I think that could be looking pretty good for the Braves as far as a rotation that includes Schwellenbach and Strider and Sale, Grant Holmes, A.J. Smith-Shawver. That's a pretty good-looking starting five, but clearly missing Ronaldo Lopez. Just no two ways about that. Coming up for the Braves, they've got that 3-game series against the Blue Jays, the off day, then 3 against the Minnesota Twins, and then after that, it'll be the St. Louis Cardinals who roll in. And all of a sudden, we're going to find ourselves in the latter part of the month of April. The Braves will go out on the road again, where they will play 6 more games before closing out the month of April, and we'll see where they are. The 0-7 start was obviously not ideal. You kind of had one foot in the grave, to use that old phrase. But it's early, and there's a lot of baseball left to be played, as the other cliche goes. So can the Braves turn themselves around and head that right direction and close out the month of April with some momentum, get Spencer Strider back, and then count down the days to Ronald Acuña Jr.'s return, because that can only help a Braves club that needs all the offense it can get. And an MVP caliber player, that's the kind of jolt that any club would love to be getting, and the Braves could sorely use it. But that's going to do it for this edition of From the Diamond. As always, appreciate you guys riding along with me. My thanks to Neil Solondz for joining the show and talking a little bit of Braves and Rays with me. And my thanks to all of you for tuning in to From the Diamond. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You can also find it on the Odyssey app, and I'll be back with you again on Sunday from 5 to 7 right here on 92.9 The Game every week throughout baseball season. Thanks to my producer, Miles, and I look forward to catching up with you guys next week as we talk about the Braves and Major League Baseball here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. Until next time, so long, everyone.